Hello everyone, it's Ashwin Rao. Today's video sees us travel back to Indonesia to peer into another maker and a makeup from one of the most well-known and highly regarded shoemakers coming out of Indonesia. Now you might wonder why Indonesia has become such a hotbed for shoe and boot making in the 21st century. Well, the heritage of shoemaking, at least the Western style of shoemaking in Indonesia, which is actually a giant country. I think its landmass is that in excess of the United States. So don't think of this as a small island country, but as a vast region of many islands, of which Indonesia really compromises, and was once a Dutch colony, the Dutch East Indies. And so that tradition of shoemaking and bootmaking hails from Dutch colonization in the 1800s. And so today, Jakarta and more notably Bandung, Indonesia, have become truly a hotbed for shoemaking and bootmaking. And this particular brand is one of the leaders in that movement, and this is Sagara. So Sagara is most well regarded for two specific models. They are the Valiant and the Cordmaster. Now the Cordmaster is their lineman style shoe. It's a monkey boot with a lace-to-toe build and a more linear side paneling profile with a lineman's patch, while the Valiant, which this is an example of, has this more swooping side paneling face transitioning to the collar, usually does not include a lineman's patch. But this model features a couple of interesting characteristics that blend the aesthetics of the Cordmaster and the Valiant shoes and turn it into something that's more akin to a elevated shoe or almost near chukka boot height. This is about a 3 to 3.5 inch height shoe, and it's considered and called the Valiant shoe. This was made as an MTO by a member of the Stitch Down community who decided that it no longer fit their collection, and so I swooped in and picked this up at an incredible price. So thank you to that member, you know who you are. And this model is one that I've been long waiting to try. I particularly am fond of the short boot makeup. So this is the Valiant shoe, and the Valiant shoe, as you can see, is comprised of 6 antique brass eyelets. The side panel, which is characteristic of this lace-to-toe model that transitions into this open channel lacing system. You can see here the flesh side as opposed to the rough outside. This is a Badalassi Carlo Pueblo leather. Badalassi Carlo Tannery is well regarded, hailing from Italy, as a manufacturer of high quality veg tan leathers. And I've owned a pair of Pueblo leathers in an olive colorway, and I really found it to be a beautiful leather in terms of patina and aging. And it just has that nice, rich veg tan heritage with a bit of pull up, maybe less so than Chrome Excel. This particular model is largely comprised of the rough outside of that leather, the Badalassi Carlo Pueblo, and it's in a tobacco colorway in this instance. So this dark brown, you could almost call it coffee or tobacco colored leather, which I think is nice as it's highlighted here in this lineman's patch, which transitions to these 3 eyelets. So why a lineman's patch? Well, in this particular model, it's purely for aesthetic reasons, but traditionally the lineman's patch has been used as a place of reinforcement for linemen, those individuals who are on power lines who would develop a lot of friction at this point in the shoe. So this additional piece of leather would protect their feet in the instance of that specific work circumstance. So in the case of this model, this beautiful Badalassi Carlo Pueblo is built upon the Morgan last, which is one of Sagara's most well-regarded lasts. You can see it's a round-toed, slightly asymmetric last with some anatomic profiling here. It's a beautiful last for a boot or a low boot in this case. you can see that this Vibram 2021 sand colored sole, which is one of my favorite soles in terms of wedges. I'm not a huge wedge person, but when I want something a little bit more casual, this is my choice because it has a really nice profile. If you have a shoe that has a little bit more curvature to the arch on that footbed, you'll get more of a scalloped look in this particular model. And this model actually does have a fair bit of arch support, but in this case, the profile of this Vibram 2021 is not as dramatic on this pair. You can see that this shoe has the outsole followed by one layer of midsole, which is a full grain leather, and then the remainder of the sole. And here you can see this really beautiful navy colored stitching, which is a request from the previous owner, built upon a 270-degree storm welt. You can see the 270 degrees of storm welting coming through here. And actually then the storm welt disappears, but the stitching, which is I believe a hand done part of this shoe, is a 360-degree remaining stitch all the way around the entire profile of the shoe. But the storm welt only reaches to 270 degrees to essentially this point where the heel counter meets the side paneling here. So just keep that in mind. There's a little hint of stitching here on the toe here, which is a nice little aesthetic touch. You can see the shoe has been worn a couple times with the previous owner, but very little wear, very little toe or heel drag here, and it just cleaned up really, really well. I'm really fond of this rough out, which is a little higher density nap. Not quite nubuck, but also does have this slight variation with brushing that you can achieve. And then this Badalassi Carlo Pueblo tobacco leather really shows you what the inside of that leather, the flesh side, really looks like. You can see if you peer into the shoe that there's a lining. This is a full grain veg tan leather lining. And then you can see the Sagara profile here, the Sagara handcrafted Indonesia emblem, which is characteristic of all of their shoes. There is a full leather footbed if you peer inside, with a little bit of an arch pad here for arch support. It is a partially gusseted tongue on this model, so partial gusseting provides a little bit more rainproofing. And again, a natural edge dressing with outsole stitching, which is contrasted using that navy blue profile, which I think is a nice little accent. So kudos to the last person who designed this shoe. And then you see a tonal stitching, almost a natural colored stitching that pops on the flesh side here, but is hidden well on the remainder of the shoe. So most Valiant models do not have this side paneling patch here and extend to about 5 to 6 inches in height, so several more eyelets and a little bit more height to the shaft. But this model, as you can see, does not have that, but I actually am preferring that in this particular instance because this particular style fits a niche in my shoe repertoire a little bit more easily. So again, the Valiant shoe from Sagara, built via MTO with 6 eyelets, no speed hooks, on a Vibram 2021 wedge sole with a 270-degree storm welt with stitching done all the way through the 360-degree range using a Badalassi Carlo Pueblo tobacco colored leather with the rough outside largely featured and a small lineman's patch using the flesh side and antique brass eyelets. That pretty much summarizes it, other than saying that this is built on that Morgan last, which is a nice fitting, comfortable, spacious last. Should have a reasonable amount of arch support and a appropriate heel that does not necessarily hug your heel, but stabilizes it well. You can see that the profile of that heel is more straight up and down here. The stitching work is very cleanly done on the upper. I can see nary stray stitch, so Sagara does a really good job with a high density stitch profile for their upper. You can also see a relatively high density stitching done on this storm welt here. Very clean work done, and they do this little overlapping chain stitch along the end of the stitching just to hide the loose ends there. Really well done shoe with a nice profile. I think this is one that's gonna get quite a bit of wear in my particular use because I like this style as a more casual style to go with denim. Sagara, Bandung, Indonesia. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you enjoyed this little preview of the Sagara Valiant shoe. Give these guys a try the next time you have a chance. Have a good one. Take care and goodbye.